Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Toledo. I'm a storyteller. So I have a head full of stories to see what you think of stories. I thought that it's important when we have so much winter time, so much snow out there, that we could have ourselves a story with a little bit of summertime in it. This is called The Massachusetts Mosquitoes. When I was growing up in Ohio, I was going to come out to Massachusetts. Now, this was a long time, way before you girls were born, where it was in 1987, and I was coming out here, and my friends had said, "What? You're going to move out to Massachusetts? Don't you know about the Massachusetts mosquitoes?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" I knew the Ohio mosquitoes were this big, and he said, "Oh, no, the Massachusetts mosquitoes are this big." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "No." And they said, "Yes." And I said, "No." And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Pushaw." Can you try that word? Go ahead and try that. Pushaw. It's that old-fashioned word for, gosh darn it, no, impossible. But it sounds, kind of funny, so I always like that. If you stub your toe, you can go, "Pushaw." Well, I had said pushaw and forgot about my friend's warning about these giant Massachusetts mosquitoes until I came out to Massachusetts. It was December. You know how we had so much snow all this winter? It seemed like every other weekend there was snow falling from the sky, and it was the same way back in '87, and I had to shovel out my car all the time, and I wondered if spring would ever get here. And then it started to warm up just a little bit. Did you ever see those crocuses? Little tiny flowers that poke through the snow in the real early spring. And I knew that maybe it might get warm again. So I watched, and the snow started to melt. And then summer came, and I thought, oh, this is a perfect day. It was in the middle of July, and it was really hot, and I'd forgotten all about my friend's warnings about the giant Massachusetts mosquitoes. So I went out to the beach, and I thought, I'll just lay here. And I got on my skimpy little bathing suit, and I took my towel, and I laid down on the beach, and as I was laying there, I heard, can you try to make that sound? Go ahead. And I looked and I said, "What on earth is that?" And I looked around and I couldn't see anything, and I rolled over and it seemed like it was getting louder. And I thought, "What is that?" And when I rolled back over, it was even louder. And I looked up in the sky, and there they were, all these giant Massachusetts mosquitoes. They were this big. They had stingers this long and helmets and goggles and scarves. And they were dive bombing at me at 100 miles an hour. And all I had on was that skimpy little bathing suit. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't run. If one of those stingers lands in me, I'll be done for sure. But I looked, and right beside me, there was one of those 55-gallon drums. Have you ever seen those big trash cans they have at beaches and parks and stuff like that? And luckily, it was empty. And I picked it up and whoop, put it over my head. And I thought, oh, now I'll be safe. And the mosquitoes, yeah, boom, yeah, boom, yeah, boom, were dive bombing against that can. And I thought, oh, I'll just stay here until they're gone. But then I thought, ew, jeez, it smells bad in here, but it's better to be stinky than to be dead. And I looked around. It was all dark in there, and all of a sudden, ah! One of those stingers, they went right through the can. They were drilling through that metal, and it almost landed right in me. If one of them would stay too long, it would suck all my blood out, and I'd be dead. And I felt underneath my foot, and there was this big rock, and I picked up the rock, and I started pounding over the stingers. And I was pounding over 500 with one arm and 500 with another, and suddenly, all that buzzing got louder and louder. And the whole can just lifted up and went above my head and out over the harbor until it slowly sunk down and splashed into the water and disappeared. And that was the last time I ever saw any of those giant Massachusetts mosquitoes. The end. So I think it's fun. Do you think that there could actually be mosquitoes that are that big? Does it still make it fun to listen to this story?
Yes.
You go ahead, and you can have stories like that. That story's been around for 150 years. They said in the Civil War, a gentleman had used that, and he had a giant cooking pot, and he put it over his head, and the mosquitoes banged into him. So you can take anything. If you want to make a tall tale, you can just exaggerate it. You could say, oh, I have my polka-dotted scarf, but my polka-dotted scarf, it's so heavy, and I put it on, and it started to weigh me down. And I thought, I don't know why it's so heavy. I don't know. The scarf was always light before. And you can make up a whole thing about the scarf pushing your head down onto the floor in your living room. And your mother's saying, what's going on? It's the scarf, Mama! Help! Or you could have shoes. I don't know what happened. I got my shoes on. And these shoes were the coolest things. I got these shoes and I put them on. And I just got them. I was over at Goodwill. And my friends always said, what? You're buying used shoes? I said, I put some foot powder in them. It's all right. And I put them on. And all of a sudden, I could run fast like the wind. They had a race in gym class. And I said, I'll go to this first one against the wall. And whoosh, I won. And the other girls said, you were always the slowest one. What happened? I got new shoes. They're magic shoes. You can make up stories about anything. You can have stories about your own life. Have you ever had anything silly happen to you?
Yeah.
What happened to you that was silly?
Well, once I was going to the beach, and there were seagulls there, and I took some food with me, and I was eating it. And I left it on the beach, and I went to go get some ice cream. So when I came back, all the seagulls were eating it.
Ah!
And I just
And it was
started
your
chasing
lunch.
them.
Ah! Yeah, but did you eat it after the seagulls had ate it?
I did. That's too disgusting.
Now you see, I bicycled down the coast of California from Oregon, from Astoria, Oregon, or Eugene, Oregon that time, all the way down to Los Angeles. So it was 1,100 miles. And I met this Dutch guy on the road, and he and I hit it off. So we shared our tent, and we're camping out, and we were south of San Francisco. And in the middle of the night, I said, Bert, somebody's out there in our bags. And we had our panniers from the bicycle on the picnic table in this little campground. It was October, so there wasn't a whole lot of people camping. Raccoons had opened up our bags. They unzipped them, and they were eating our oatmeal. And we thought, we woke up in the morning, we got rid of the raccoons, and we looked, and they'd had a big hole in the can where they'd gnawed through it, and they ate a bunch of the oatmeal, but that was the only thing we had to eat in the morning for breakfast. And we thought, ugh. But the raccoons were eating it, and then we thought, ugh. But we got nothing else, so we ate it. But we boiled it for a long time to make sure we killed the raccoon germs. But we went ahead and boiled it and boiled it and boiled it. It made it really goopy, but it was fine. Nothing happened to us. And then, because they're about 5 miles away from town. And if you wake up and then you have to go all the way into town without having breakfast. Do you ride bicycles?
Yes.
Yeah? What's the farthest place you've ever ridden?
I haven't ridden that far.
Just, yeah, Malden. That's good. This is a story called Summer on Two Wheels. In the summer of 1979, I got on a bus in Toledo, Ohio with 3 of my friends, Gary and Craig and Mike and me. We got on this bus. We'd taken our bicycles and we put them in boxes. And you had to take the front wheel off and set it inside the box, and then you had to take the pedals off and put them inside, and then you had to take the seat and take it off and stick it inside this box so it fits up a little smaller, and we put them on this bus. And all 4 of us went from Toledo out to Astoria, Oregon. We were on this bus for 2.5 days, and suddenly we're on the other side of the continent. And we get there, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we take the bicycles out of the boxes and we put them all back together. And our goal was to ride all the way across the country. We were supposed to go from Oregon to Virginia. We didn't know if we could do it or not, but other people had done it, and we thought we'd give it a try. And we thought it's too late to go find a campground, because at 5 o'clock to find something for dinner and then be able to set up camp. And we asked these people in town, is there a hotel close by? And this one guy said, oh yeah. To go to it, all you got to do is go up this mountain, and then the hotel's on the other side. And he was kind of laughing, and we thought, all right. So we had all our bags, and you had these 2 panniers on the back of the bicycle, and then you had your tent across the back, and then one guy carried the cook stove, and then we had our sleeping bags, and you had a handlebar bag on front that we had our camera, and we had all our money in that one, and we started riding up that mountain. And all 4 of us, we got about maybe halfway up the mountain, and we all had to stop. We were out of breath, and then we had to walk up to the top and then coast down, and we got to where the hotel was, and the guy behind the counter said, "What are you guys doing? Why are you so out of breath? Where'd you come from?" I said, "We just got up from the bus station. You know, the guy told us to get to the hotel. We had to come over the mountain." And the guy looked up and he started laughing. He said, "Somebody was pulling your leg." I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "'Cause there's a road that goes all the way around the mountain and you come over here. You don't have to go over the top." And I said, "What?" And that was the first mountain we went across. We started out the next day and we were riding in Oregon. Have you ever gone to Oregon?
No.
It's really lush and green and pretty along the coast. Do you know why it's so lush and green and pretty along the coast?
It's hotter there?
It's hot. Well, it's hot, but it also rains a lot. And it makes sort of that tropical rainforest, and it goes through there. And so it's really green because it's got so much rain. We had 3 days in the sunshine. We rode about maybe 30 miles, just trying to get used to riding with the bicycles and shifting stuff around. And then on the 4th day, it started raining. And we had these rain suits and we put them on, but it was not very good because it was so hot. In the summertime, you would sweat just as much as if you were underneath, you didn't have it. So we took them off and we get to this campground. And the campground is out in the middle of the country. And we get in and we thought all we want to do is put on some dry clothes. And we get our tent set up and we open up our panniers and all our clothes were soaking wet. You could pull them out and you just wring water out of them. And we thought that the panniers were supposed to be waterproof. And we looked on the little tag and it said water resistant. And we thought, oh geez, it just keeps the heavy dew off of them. And we went to the store at the campground, at the office, and said, "Where's your washer and dryer?" And the woman there said, "Oh, we don't have one." And I said, "What do you mean? Where's the closest dryer? All our clothes are wet." And she said, "Oh, it's 4 miles in the direction you guys came in the little town back there." And after you've already ridden 30 miles, you don't want to ride 4 more miles just to go get your clothes dried. And my buddy Mike went in the bathroom. You know those dryers where you push your hand on the button in the bathroom and the hot air comes out? He said, "Look at this. We can dry our clothes out with that." And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So we're over here and we're taking turns putting our clothes up and just holding them there until they dried out. It took quite a while, but you got them dried out. It was better than riding 4 miles in the rain to go over. Well, I was standing there and I had my underwear and I was drying it out. This one boy who was about 8 walks into the bathroom and looks up and says, "Oh, you're pretty big to have an accident." I didn't have an accident. I'm over here. I'm riding across the country. And he said, "What do you mean riding across the country? We're on bicycles going across the country." And he looked over and he said, "Where'd you start from?" And I said, "Astoria." And he said, "That's not even 100 miles away." And I said, "We're going to go 5,000 miles, but every trip has to start with one little footstep, and this is ours, and we're starting here." And he looked over. I could tell that he didn't quite believe we were really going to do it. But we got our clothes all dried out, and we rode across the Cascade Mountains. And when he went over the mountains, everything on this side was all green and lush, and everything on this side was all dry, like semi-desert. And we were just astounded that it was so dry. The mountains had stopped all the rain. We get across, and we're starting to ride, and we're getting stronger. All of those Cascade Mountains, we were able to ride up without stopping. And we're going across, and we're in the middle of Oregon, where it's so dry, they have cows that they just let run around outside. They brand them, but it's so dry that they can't put them in one fence because they would need to have 10 acres for each cow. And out where we were riding in the middle of central Oregon, I was in the lead. I was doing maybe 15 miles an hour on my bicycle, and it was on this nice, gentle downhill, and my buddies were kind of far behind me, and there was a cow on the side of the road, and I didn't think anything of it. I grew up in Ohio, and we had a dairy farm close to my parents, and, cows aren't so smart or anything. They're just kind of walking around eating grass. And a car was coming toward me, and all of a sudden, this cow got scared by the car, and it jumped out in front of me, and bang! I hit a cow with my bicycle. And my buddy, I went sliding along the road, and I was so mad, I picked up a rock and I threw it at the cow, and the cow goes, moo, and lumbers off. And the cow wasn't even hurt, and my bicycle wasn't hurt either. I got it up. The only thing that was really hurt was my pride, where I got my elbows kind of scraped up, and then I got my legs scraped up, but I wasn't hurt bad or anything. And my friends that night, they were saying, "Well, let's put on a play." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And Gary was me, and Craig was the cow, and Mike was the guy driving the car. And I had said, "I'm going to sue the farmer." And the guy in the car said, "Oh, no, you can't sue the farmer because if you hurt his cow, he can sue you." And I said, "What?" heard of such a thing. And I was so mad. And when I saw my friends put on a play about me being mad, it was the first time I ever saw, sort of reflected, what I looked like. Have you ever been really mad and looked at yourself in a window or a mirror or something? And you're kind of startled. I was like, I didn't think I was that mad. And I learned it's, good to be mad about things that are worth being mad about, but just for silly stuff like hitting a cow, you might as well laugh about it. So that's just what I did. And we kept riding. We got all the way over to Idaho, and we went over to Missoula, Montana, and then we went to Yellowstone National Park. Have you ever heard of that? Seen pictures of it?
I read about it.
Yeah. Did you ever see the paint pots?
Yeah.
It's these things, these giant pools of water that are probably as big as this whole rug where we're sitting here. And you look at it, and they've got rainbows inside the water. There are different kinds of bacteria that as the water bubbles up from the ground, it's so hot, and as the water cools off, different kinds of bacteria live inside the water. And it's beautiful to look at. And you got Old Faithful shooting off every 22 minutes or something. They have bleachers over here, and this geyser just shoots water out of the ground. And we were on our bicycles, and we're sitting there, and Gary, he said, I can't believe it. They had a big digital clock, which was really high-tech back in 1979. And then he said, I am not going to watch this. This is just a big tourist trap. And I said, Gary, ignore the people. Come on over. Just sit here. You can see it. It's nice. And he said, no. He went over and sat on the other side of the store and just read a newspaper instead of watching Old Faithful. I thought he was being silly. And outside of Yellowstone, we ran into our old high school English teacher who gave us breakfast. We stayed there. He had moved from Ohio out to Wyoming, and we had a great time staying with him. Plus, what are your teachers' names at school?
Mrs. Ritchie?
Yep. Right. This was Mr. Flanagan. But when we got out there, this was 4 years after we graduated from high school, he said, you can just call me Mike now. And even then, it was so weird to be able to call my teacher by his first name. Well, we kept going. We went through the rest of Wyoming, and oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe it. The wind, any way you turned, the wind was always at your face, except for one day. We had the wind at our back. We went 100 miles, and it felt like we had little motors on our bicycles because we were zipping along so fast. And it wasn't even hard. We went way until it got dark. Most of the time we'd stop to set up camp and everything. But there, we got it set. And the next day the wind shifts, and then we're riding in our faces again. We went across the Continental Divide 9 times. Have you heard about that in school? No. If you have the Rocky Mountains, and these are all the mountains going, when the rain comes down, the Continental Divide is an imaginary line. If it rains, it goes to this side over to the Pacific, and if it rains here, it goes all the way over to the Atlantic Ocean. So we crossed it 9 times. They had different signs, and we crossed over Hoosier Pass, which was over 11,000 feet tall. And we bicycled, all 4 of us bicycled up to the top of that without stopping. And we got all the way. There was one little pull-off there, and there was a guy sitting there, and he had bread in his hand. And birds would fly over and land in your hand and eat the bread. I felt like I was Dr. Doolittle. You ever seen, talking to the animals, and the bird lands over here, and I said, oh, that is so cool. And the bird takes off and flies, and they come back and get some more bread. Well, we got all the way to Pueblo, Colorado. Mike had graduated from college that spring, and he was really anxious to get a new job. So he left and took a bus back, and Craig, it was about 90 degrees in the shade. It was really hot that summer, and Craig was almost having heat stroke. Have you ever done that? You've been outside and it's so hot? All I do is sweat when I go along, but he would actually feel like he was sick or start to feel like he was going to faint. So he quit, and then it was Gary and I that kept on riding. We had a big party for all 4 of us. We got one motel room there in Pueblo, Colorado, and we had a big meal. When we would cook our meals, we had this camp stove, and we'd cook a gallon of spaghetti. Had all this water, and all 4 of us would eat it. We'd look around for more to eat. And it was so funny. When you go riding your bicycle across the country, your arms are really skinny, but your legs are really big. And we had the funniest tan because our backs were really tanned, and the top of our legs were tanned, but underneath, over here on the bottom of your legs, the backside, was white as snow because the sun never would shine there. And we had these gloves that you would wear, so, when I hit the cow and I went bouncing down the road, they had these leather gloves that had the fingers cut out so they're not so hot, but it protects your palm. So if you go sliding on the road, At least now it's not going to hurt your hand and get scraped up quite so bad. Well, Gary and I take off riding. We left those guys, and they took off and went back to Ohio, and we're going across Kansas. Kansas is as hilly as this floor. I mean, it is flat, and the road just goes straight for about 300 miles. No ups, no downs, no lefts, no rights, just... And the wind was blowing right in our face. And you had to go in about third gear, the same way when we went up the mountains. But at least when you went up the mountains, you knew that you could coast down. We'd start out in the morning, and the wind is blowing in his face. And then you would go for 60 miles, and then the wind would still be blowing in your face. And when we stopped in Kansas in these little towns, these people were so cool. It's like if we went over to your house, and somebody said, hey, can we camp here in your yard? Sure, come on over. People would bring us out fried chicken. People would come over and give us lemonade. They were so nice to us. We met these two guys that were bicycling across the country, but they were going so fast. We tried to keep up with them for one day. Have you ever done that where you're walking with your friend, but your friend is walking really fast, and you're like, what are you doing? Slow down. That's the way it was with us. These guys, have you ever heard of drafting on a bicycle? You have one bicycle that's right here in front, and then the other bicycle is right on the back tire, and the wind sort of sucks you along and pulls you along, so it makes it easier for the guy pedaling back here, except if the first guy stops real quick, you have a big crash. So that part can be dangerous. You got to really pay attention and make sure it's okay. Well, we only rode with those guys for one day. It just about killed us because we were trying to draft them and keep up with them, and they were going really fast. But Gary and I like to stop and see people. So we would stop and we said, you guys go on, maybe we'll catch up with you, maybe we won't. We ended up getting all the way over to the Mississippi River. And then we're going to go across the Mississippi. And the Mississippi River is so huge. I mean, you can see across the other side, but it's really far. And we were going to take a ferry because the ferry kept us from going down to catch a bridge. And it was so hot and we were sweating so much. Gary took a whole bunch of pennies and he threw them at me, just goofing around, and the pennies stuck to my chest. So we took all our coins and we put them on my chest, and I took a picture like this, Money Man! And it was my favorite picture the whole summer. When we get across to the other side and we're going across the Mississippi, and we get over to the Ozarks, and we're in Missouri, in the middle of the Ozarks, we met this guy, Frank, who said, why don't you guys come over to my place? You can camp there. We were so grateful. So we go over to his place, and we're out in the woods. He doesn't have any electricity. He's got electricity, but he doesn't have any running water. And he's building this house all by himself. His outhouse, he has the toilet seat up on the ceiling of the outhouse. And I said, why'd you have that? And he said, because it's not now, it's in the summertime, it doesn't make a difference. But in the wintertime, when I want to go out and use the bathroom, I have to turn a switch, and it's got a heat lamp. And it's got to be timed at exactly 5 minutes, and then I can go out and I pull the toilet seat, and it's warm to sit down on. If it's less than 5 minutes, it's really cold yet, and if it's more than 5 minutes, you will burn your butt when you sit on it. And I thought that was so clever. So we were sitting there with him, and this guy, I'd never seen anybody ever do this. He drank a whole fifth of this vodka that I was astounded. And he wasn't really drunk. And he never said it, and nobody said anything, but I knew then that this guy was an alcoholic. He was drinking way too much. And he was still a nice guy, but it was just, I felt bad for him. We left in the morning, and I have no idea what happened to him. We said our goodbyes, and he went off to work. And Gary and I were going across the Ozarks. And you go up the mountains. In the Rocky Mountains, we'd go back like this, back and forth for the switchbacks to go up the mountains. But the Ozarks were almost straight up and straight down in a lot of places. We had a guy behind us in a car time us to see how fast we were going. How many miles per hour do you think we were going on the bicycle? Take a guess. I'll tell you up or down until you get the right number. Any number. You never know.
15.
More than 15.
20.
More than 20.
30.
More than 30.
60.
A little bit less than 60.
59.
Nope, more down, a little bit more.
55.
One less than 55.
54.
Yep, 54 miles an hour on bicycle tires that were this wide. And if there was a rock in the road and we hit it, we'd go tumbling all over the place. If there was a dog that ran out in front of us, you know, you'd probably die if you got in a wreck doing 54 miles an hour. So we didn't go that fast very often, but boy, it was a rush. We're going so fast, felt like you're on a motorcycle. My eyes were watering and we're zipping down. Woo! And we ended up stopping in a little tiny town in Missouri. And we asked the police if we could stay in this park that they had. Have you ever seen the buildings in some parks where it's just 4 posts with a roof and they got the picnic tables underneath? Mm-hmm. We were there. We were the only people. It was raining. I was writing a letter to my mother, and Gary was reading Rolling Stone magazine, all the stuff with rock and roll. And out of the rain, they had one light bulb hanging down. Out of the rain, into our shelter, walks a skunk. And I said, Gary, don't move! And the skunk comes over and smells us. And the skunk walks around. And then the skunk walks out into the rain. I thought that everything we owned was going to smell like a skunk. And we put our sleeping bags up on top of the picnic tables. And in the morning we left. The policeman came over to see how we slept. And we told him about the skunk. And he was laughing. Well, we got all the way over to Virginia. And we didn't have any more skunks. And we were in this place called Farmville, Virginia, not too far from where we were going to end up. And I had put our bicycles against a tree, which was right beside this stream, and there was a house. And we were going to go ask if we could camp in the yard. But when I knocked on the door, nobody was home, and we're going back to the bicycles, and Gary's bicycle starts rolling by itself. And it just rolls, and it goes down. It was balanced so good that it rolled into the stream. And Gary runs into the stream, and the water's about up to his chest, and he's hollering, Tony, help! And he's grabbing the bicycle, and I'm hollering, and I'm holding on to the tree. I don't know if you've ever done this, but it suddenly struck me as the funniest thing in the world to see my buddy in a stream with his bicycle, with all his bags and everything on it, and I started laughing. And he didn't want me to laugh. He didn't like me to laugh, and I tried not to laugh, but it made me laugh harder. And then he looks up, and he got so mad, he says, oh yeah, you think it's so funny? At least I never hit a cow with my bicycle. And I helped him pull his bicycle out. We didn't talk to each other for the rest of the afternoon. But when you're friends with somebody, you know, by the time you're going to fix supper, you should be talking to each other. And we made it all the way over to Yorktown, Virginia. When we got to the ocean, we put our front wheel into the Atlantic. When we'd taken off from the Pacific, we put our back wheel in, so we'd gone 5,000 miles. And Gary's brothers came over and picked us up from Ohio, took us up to Ohio. And I was so thankful, oh, the trip's done. For the last couple weeks, I was just hoping it's going to be done, it's going to be done, then I can go back home. When we got home, I was surprised. I missed being on the road. I missed camping out. I missed taking our showers. Did you ever see those hand pumps where you pump the water up and down like that? Yeah, we would take showers in those along the side of the road. You would put on your bathing suit, and just one guy would pump and the other guy would clean up, and I missed doing that. Even though the water was cold, you still got cleaned up, and we're laughing. We got back, and I suddenly realized, I shouldn't say suddenly, slowly realized, that the whole fun of the trip was in the doing and not in the finishing. And that's the story of Summer on Two Wheels, when I rode my bicycle across the country. What'd you think of that?
It was really good.
Now, you can go ahead and do anything. Well, on a bicycle, there's a bunch of bicycle books that I just love. There's one called Miles from Nowhere by Barbara Savage. She rode her bicycle around the world for 2 years with her husband. They went over to India. They went through, let's see, where else? They went all over. They went across the country here. Then they went through part of Africa. They went all over. I thought it was just a great story. And this woman wrote this book, and the sad part was, just as the book was getting ready to be published, because it takes a long time to write it, and then you got to send it in, and then your editor looks at it and stuff. Right before it got published, she was killed in a bicycling accident in California. And her husband thought maybe he shouldn't publish the book, and then he thought, no, he should. I'm glad he did, because it was a great story, and Barbara was a wonderful writer. So it's a tribute to her. And you can have, you know, when we were asking before about anything silly happened to you, when I was in 5th grade, I went to Doc Steingus's house. And Doc and I you ever look around your house and you're trying to find something to eat? It's before supper, it's after school, you're looking around, and all he had in his house was Cheerios. That's all we could find. So he started eating a bowl of Cheerios, but he was making me laugh. And I laughed so hard that the Cheerios shot out my nose. And I hope that never happens to either one of you, because they're like little hunks of sandpaper. They come out, and you're going, ah! And then he's laughing harder, and then it makes me laugh harder, and then more of them shoot out, and then there's milk all over, and his mother comes over and says, boys, what are you doing? I said, no, make him stop, I'm laughing, no. So we still laugh about that. Now, I think there should have a story, too, that has a girl in it. What do you think about that? You can have all sorts of stories. Have you ever heard of a book called Read All About It by Jim Trelease? He collected all these stories. He does a read aloud handbook. So I love to read. Do you have any books at home on a bookshelf piled up in your room?
A lot.
Oh, yeah? Do you like to buy books, or do you like to go to the library?
Well, at my school, they
Mhm.
have like book fairs sometimes.
Yep.
So I buy it from there. They're cheaper than outside.
Yep.
Yeah,
So you can get a bunch of them. You know another place where you can get really cheap books? Library book sales. If you ask your librarian, the town librarian, and watch for other book sales, they usually sell the paperbacks for 50 cents and the hardbound copies for $1. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not interested in reading, but if you go through and you have $4, you can get a whole pile of books dirt cheap, and all they have is it says ex-library book, where it's discarded, but the words don't expire. The words don't smell bad. The words stay good for the next 100 years, the next 1,000 years, if you keep the book out of the rain. So this book, Jim Trelease's book, put all these stories in it. If you check those out, they're really cool. Now, how do you know each other?
Well,
We used to go to the same school.
Oh, so you still stay friends, eh?
yeah.
Do you sleep over at each other's houses?
Sometimes.
If you do that, if you're having a sleepover, or you're over at her house and it's, an hour, you've been playing and you don't know what to do, you get one of these books, and these stories are so cool, you can read them out loud to each other. And some of them are funny, and some of them are scary, and some of them are just dramatic, and some of them are fascinating. And this is one that's it's a nice made-up story. Judith Garrog put this in, The 3 Wishes. Melinda Alice was in 8th grade, and she thought that she was just the smartest girl in the entire school. And Melinda Alice, she was on the soccer team, and she blocked every shot. She was a goalie. And she was always the star of the team. And Melinda Alice, though, had this sort of mean streak about her. She saw you and said, oh, you talk to that new girl. You can't sit with me at lunch anymore for the next month because you talk to her. Or she would say, oh, I don't like your dress. And she wouldn't talk to that girl for a while. But the teachers just saw that, oh, Melinda Alice was there and all these other girls were gathered around, and they thought, what a natural-born leader. And Melinda Alice, she thought, I've got a math test tomorrow, but I've got a soccer match tonight. But I'll be too tired to study. I only live 5 blocks away from school. I'll just get up early in the morning and go look at my notes, and I'm sure I will get an A on the test. Because if Melinda Alice ever got less than an A, she thought that she'd practically failed the whole test. Oh, she got a B. She thought it was just terrible. So she went to the soccer match. She actually scored a goal from one end of the field all the way to the other. It was the only goal. She won the game. They're over there. They're carrying on her shoulders, and everybody's cheering when she gets home. Her mother had supper waiting for her, had saved it. And Melinda Alice said, oh, thank you, Mama, but I am tired. I'm going to go to bed now. I got to get up early, and I'll study for my test. And her mother said, good night. And in the morning, Melinda Alice got up, and she was walking to school. And it was springtime, and she looked down. She almost stepped on a snail. Ew! That thing shouldn't even be alive. It's all slimy. Ew! I don't think it should be alive at all. And she lifted up her shoe, and she was going to crush the snail. But the snail looked up and said, if you let me live, I'll grant you 3 wishes. And Melinda Alice looked around. 3 wishes? 3 wishes? I don't know if you'll give me 3 wishes or not, snail. She thought it was kind of weird to be talking to a talking snail. She looked around. There wasn't anybody else there. And she said, all right, snail, for my first wish, I wish that my next 1,000 wishes come true. And the snail looked up and said, you're a very clever girl, and went underneath the bush. And Melinda Alice was there, and she said, I don't know if I really got 1,000 wishes or not. I wish I could have pierced ears. Poof! She got pierced ears. I wish I had a new dress. Poof! She had a brand new dress. I wish I had new shoes. Poof! She got new shoes. They weren't that much different from her old ones, which just goes to show what good taste she has. And then she said, wait a minute. I wonder if this snail could give food to everybody in the whole world who's hungry. I wonder if this snail could go ahead and give a house to anybody who needs it. But then that wave of altruism passed, and Melinda Alice started thinking, wait a minute, those kids at school that pick on me, I could make hot dogs stick to their nose at lunch. I could make their hair fall out in math class. I could make their gym shorts fall down when they're shooting baskets. And she was thinking of all the mean things she could do to everybody she didn't like, and all of a sudden she heard the first bell, and Melinda Alice ran over to school, and Freddie was in the locker right beside hers, and Freddie said, hi, Melinda Alice. She goes, hi, Freddie. And Freddie said, are you ready for the math test? And Melinda Alice said, oh, the math test! That stupid snail made me late for school. I didn't get a chance to study. I'm going to flunk the test. I wish I was dead. Be careful what you wish for. The 3 wishes. So, what do you think about that?
I like that one.
Yeah.
It's silly. You go ahead and you have them, but I think too, us people, we think that, oh, I want this and I want that and I want this. And then sometimes, have you ever had something you wanted and when you got it, it wasn't nearly as good as you thought it would be?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. I mean, adults do the same thing. I gotta get this new car, and then suddenly you're straddled with huge car payments. And you have this car and nobody cares about the car. It's expensive to drive around. That's why my car, it's older, but it works fine. Oh, you know what I would do now? What do you think about a scary story?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Of course.
Of course, eh? Really scary or just mildly scary?
Yeah, it's scary.
A little scary or a tiny bit scary?
Scary.
A little jump or a huge ooh?
A huge ooh.
All right, you asked for it. We'll see. This is called the bog, the swamp, the marsh, the bog. Once upon a time, there was a boy in Salem. Now, this was a long time ago when people got around with horses and they walked places. And this boy, he'd said to his mother, Ma, can I go over to my friend's house? And his mother said, don't you know what day it is? And the boy said, yeah, it's Tuesday. And his mother said, it's Tuesday, but don't you know what day it is? It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday, but it's also All Hallows Eve. Now, if you're going to go over to your friend's house, you make sure you get home before dark. And whatever you do, don't go through the bog. And the boy said, why? And his mama said, because in the bog, that's where all the evil spirits rise up on All Hallows Eve. Now, you stay out of there. And the boy said, but Ma, the bog's a shortcut. I've gone through there lots of times. Don't you go through there on All Hallows Eve. And the boy said, all right. And he was walking out of the house, and he was thinking to himself, pshaw! And he was walking on that ridge road all the way around that bog. He went 2 miles extra, and he got over to his friend's house, and they were chopping wood for an hour. And then they went out and milked the cow, and they put the hay out for the horse, and they gathered up the eggs, and there was still a whole bunch of time left in the afternoon, and those 2 boys, they were talking and talking and talking. And all of a sudden, that boy looked up, and he saw the sun was lower on the horizon. And he saw that the shadows were getting long, and he said, I got to be home, and I got to be going, I got to go. And he said his goodbyes, and he started walking down that dirt road. And when he got to where the road forked, he looked, and the shadows were even longer. The sun was even lower. And he thought, if I go on the ridge road, it'll be dark for sure by the time I get home. But Ma told me not to be out after dark on All Hallows Eve. But the bog's a shortcut, but she told me not to go in the bog. But at least I'll get home before dark. And he went down that path to the left into the bog. And the path got narrower and narrower until it was just wide enough for one horse and buggy to go through. And the reeds were growing up beside him. Over his head, it was as though he was walking in a maze. And in the center of the bog, there was one old oak tree. It had been struck by lightning, and it looked like it was just a giant hand trying to reach up and grab the clouds and drown them in the mud. And as the boy went around the bend, he looked, and underneath that oak tree, there was a woman lying on the ground, and she had her head down on her arm. And the boy ran up to her and said, "Ma'am, I don't know what you're doing here, ma'am, but ma'am, you gotta be going, ma'am. You can't be staying here, not on All Hallows Eve." And the woman still kept her head down on her arm. And the boy went to tap her on the shoulder, and he didn't realize that the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the twilight was falling over that bog, and the darkness was coming. And when he tapped her on the shoulder, that woman lifted up her head. Ah! No eyes, no mouth, no face! Ah! And the boy took off running. All he could hear behind him, ah! Ah! And the darkness fell on him like a blanket. And the boy was running down the path, and he would go into the mud and then back. And he looked up, and there was one man, and he saw a horse-drawn wagon with a lantern there. And the boy ran up to, "What on earth are you doing out here in a night like this?" My mama told me not to come through the bog, but I was trying to help this woman, but it's horrible. She didn't have no eyes, no mouth, no face, nothing. And in that thin lantern light, that old man looked and said, "Oh, really? Did she look like this?" And he peeled off his face, and whomp, the light went out. The end. Is that creepy enough? You know what's funny, though? I tell that stories for adults. I was at a coffee shop at my friend's in Salem for Halloween, and one woman had a cup of coffee. And I said, "Ma'am, you might want to put your coffee down, because when I yell, I really try to scare you." "Oh, I got nerves of steel." I said, "Okay." And when the woman lifted up her head and I screamed, that woman's coffee all over her. And I had to stop and get some paper towels and help her clean it up. And then I was pleased to notice when I started up again, she set the coffee on the floor. Now, you might think it's very fun and glorious to be a storyteller, but little kids, kindergarten kids, say the funniest things to you. I was in the middle of one story, and the boy looked up and said, "When's the show going to start?" And I said, "Oh, about 5 minutes ago." And he said, "Oh, okay, thanks." And I just went on with the story. All the teachers laughed, and the little kid, and one girl looked up and said, "Your breath stinks." And I said, "Oh, I had some coffee this morning. I bet that's what you smell." And the teachers start laughing again. Once I was at a library, and there was this little toddler. This little girl was only about 1.5 years old. So a little kid like that can only listen to one story. And then she got up and she was walking around the library. She wasn't talking, she wasn't making any noise, so she wasn't really bothering anybody. I bent down to talk to one girl in the front row, and I didn't know the toddler was right behind me. And I knocked over the toddler and almost squashed her, and she started crying, and her mother picked her up, and the toddler was fine. But there was a girl in the 3rd grade who looked up and said, "Oh, you're a babysitter." And I thought, "Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah, I come over to your house. I'm going to babysit you, but your parents come home. You're only this tall. What happened?" "Tony Toledo sat on us and squashed us. Now we're this wide and we're only this tall," because he was a babysitter. I've had other funny stuff happen when you tell stories. You never know. Now, do you have any questions for anything about storytelling?
Is it hard to make stories?
I like to do it, so I don't think it's hard. Other people, everybody's good at something. Some people might be really great chemists. Some people might be great musicians. Some people might be great teachers. Some people might be great cameramen and TV people. And some people can be fine storytellers. So if you like it, it's good. It's the best thing I could ever do with my life. I love going over to places and telling stories, having little kids get involved. I've gone over to Danvers, to the middle school, and told ghost stories for about the last 7 years on Halloween. It's great fun. And these kids, when they are in 6th grade, yeah, right, scary, yeah, right. And then I make them jump, and they go, "Whoa, that was cool. that was pretty good." And I thought, "Oh, that's fun." Other questions?
When did you start telling stories?
I started telling stories for a job in 1990. So I've done it for 15 years now, though I think I've always been a storyteller, always telling jokes and goofing around. When I was 5 years old, I had a ball in the living room. I'm sure your parents tell you the same thing. Don't throw the ball in the living room. And I threw the ball. I knocked over the lamp, and it broke. And Mom came in. "Tony, what happened?" "Mom, a ghost came in and knocked it over." And she said, "I don't think we have any ghosts here, Tony." And then Then she said, Tony, what happened? I said, Mom, this man came off of the street and he knocked the lamp over and then he ran out. She said, I don't think anybody did that, Tony. I said, oh, a wild dog jumped in and knocked it over. And so, I mean, it's not a very good story, but for just a little kid making it up. And then she said, what happened? Well, maybe I threw the ball and the ball knocked the lamp over. Don't throw the ball in the living room, Tony. I said, sorry, Mom. Now we have to get a new lamp. Don't throw the ball anymore. I said, okay. So I didn't throw it. So I've been telling stories, though. It's funny when you, in the summertime, if I have a new story and I'm practicing the story and I'm in town and I happen to be at a red light here in Somerville and I might be in the car by myself going, I'm going to turn you into a frog, Missy. And the person in the car right beside me looks over and thinks, that guy is weird. And they roll up their window and they don't look, and I'm trying to say, I'm a storyteller, it's all right. And they don't look, and then I just drive off and they drive off.
Something happened to my music teacher like that. When she starts to warm up for her singing, she was going, ah,
Yep.
And then the person next to her goes, okay, and then
It is funny when we have things like that happen, when people, you don't know anybody's watching, and you look and think, oh. Now, you know what would be fun to do? JoJo has got she's got a show, and she's a friend of mine here in Somerville. So do you mind pretending that you're in first grade, and I'll do one story that would pretend like it would be for little kids? You don't have to do the stuff. If you want to do the stuff with me, you can. But then she might have that for her show. There's one, it's called The Crab with the Little Eyes. Look on that thing. See the banner here? In the corner, that crab that's up there. When you look at the banner, that banner I had made a long time ago, and you see how the bicycle is for the bicycle when I went across the country, and the silhouette where it's all black for me in the middle, that is because it's the story that's more important than the storyteller. And then the hat, you know how you have a magician pulls a rabbit out of a hat? I use that because that's how you can have snails talk and the magic in the story. And the heart is just for what we're doing here, the heart to heart, and we're talking. And then they got this tankard on the side. Have you ever had a black cow? A lot of people call it a root beer float with root beer and vanilla ice cream. But my friend said, oh, we call that a black cow. So this summer, when you have a root beer float, just say, oh, I'm going to have a black cow now, Mom. It sounds so exotic. So that's for the black cows. The river is because there was stories. The river keeps moving, and it's like time, because there were stories 1,000 years ago, and there'll be stories 1,000 years from now. Some are the same ones, some new ones. Everybody always loves to listen to stories. So this is one that's called The Little Crab with the Magic Eyes. Once upon a time, there was a little crab who lived along the beach, and he had his eyes poking up from his head, and he thought, this would be a perfect day to play the eye sailing game. So he said the magic words, little eyes, sail out over the deep blue sea. You want to try that? Where you can do that part where you go, little eyes, sail out over the deep blue sea. And his eyes out of his head, and they went sailing out over the ocean. And he looked down, and he could see all sorts of stuff that was in the ocean. Can you think of anything that lives in the ocean? Any kind of fish? Oh, sea urchins, perfect.
I don't know.
Dolphins, piranhas. Fish. Oh, sign language for fish. Try this. That's fish. Oh, here's another one. My wife is deaf, so that's why I learned the sign language. I love this. This is octopus. So you put your hand here. It even sort of looks like an octopus. One kid said, but an octopus has 8 legs. And I laughed and said, you cannot grow 3 fingers when you sign it. You have this. And then my wife, KR, her favorite, put one hand like this, and then the other one on top, and that's turtle. So you could say it's a sea turtle. And if the turtle's scared, pull its head in. There you go. So turtle. We'll try them again. Here's octopus, fish, and turtle. So you got 3 signs over here. That's it. Good. And then when he wanted his eyes to come back, all little crab had to say was, little eyes, sail back over the deep blue sea. Try that. Little eyes, sail back over the deep blue sea. And his eyes right into his head. Now, it just so happened, while he was there on the beach, along came Jaguar. And Jaguar looked over and said, what are you doing, little crab? Little crab looked up and said, oh, I'm just playing the eye sailing game. Why? And Jaguar looked over and said, "Can you show me?" And Little Crab said, "Sure." So he said the magic words again. Little eyes, sail out over the deep blue sea. And his eyes out of his head, and he looked down and he saw guppies. And he saw, what else? Oh, sea otters. And he saw seals. Oh, here's a whale for you. Put one hand like this. Now this is the tail, so put it on the outside of your hand. Put it out there like that, the other way, on the other side. Move that way. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Nope. The whale tail goes on the outside. Yeah, that's it. So this is the water, and then have this go down. Did you ever seen those whale watches where the whale goes into the water? Mm-hmm. So that's the tail. Make it move like the whale, and that's the sign for whale. So the whale, he saw the whale, and he saw swordfish, and he saw jellyfish, and he saw goldfish, and he saw, can you think of anything else? Oh, stingrays, those huge ones, and starfish. Sea cucumbers, good. And killer whales and dolphins. And when he wanted his eyes to come back, all he had to say was, little eyes, sail back over the deep blue sea. And his eyes would right into his head. And Jaguar looked over and said, "Little crab, that looks like fun, little crab. Can you make my eyes go sailing, little crab? Can you make my eyes go sailing?" And little crab said, "I could, but I'm afraid the big old Uncle Lonka fish might get your eyes." "I am not scared of any old Uncle Lonka fish. You make my eyes go sailing or you'll be sorry." So Little Crab said, all right. He changed the magic words. Instead of saying little eyes, he said Jaguar's eyes. So he said, Jaguar's eyes, sail out over the deep blue sea. And Jaguar's eyes flew out, and he looked down and he saw all sorts of made-up fish. He saw rugfish, and he saw shoefish, and he saw scarffish, and he saw camera fish. Can you think of any made-up kind? Curtain fish, and apple fish, perfect, and chair fish, necklace fish, and beret fish, and sock fish. And when he wanted his, pencil fish? Cool, good. When he wanted his eyes to come back, all he had to say was, Jaguar's eyes, sail back over the deep blue sea, and his eyes would right into his head. And Jaguar looked over and said, "Ooh, little crab, can you make my eyes go sailing again? That was so much fun. Make them go sailing again." And Little Crab said, "I could, but I'm afraid the big old Uncle Lonka fish might get your eyes." "I told you once, and I'll tell you again, I am not scared of any old Uncle Lonka fish. You make my eyes go sailing or you'll be sorry." He said, all right. So he said the magic words again. Jaguar's eyes, sail out over the deep blue sea, and his eyes out of his head. But just when they got to the deepest part of the ocean, out of the waves jumped that big old Uncle Lonka fish, swallowed his eyes, and went down into the water. And Jaguar was there and said, "What happened to my eyes, Little Crab? What happened to my eyes? I can't see." And Little Crab said, "I tried to warn you, Jaguar, but the big old Uncle Lonka fish got your eyes. You give me back my eyes or you'll be in trouble." But Little Crab just went scurrying down the beach. And Jaguar's lying there. And this big old vulture looked over and said, "What's wrong?" And Jaguar said, "Oh, Little Crab took my eyes and he won't give them back. Is that all?" And that vulture flew out and got these two bright blueberries, grabbed those blueberries and said, "Here, put these in." And Jaguar said, I can see. And that's why jaguars have blue eyes to this very day. "I'm going to find Little Crab and make him sorry." But he looked up and down the beach and he couldn't find him. He went back into the jungle. That's why if you go to a beach anytime today and you look underneath a rock, you might just find Little Crab there hiding even now. The end. So it's one the little kids like, and you get to have fun with it. And I think the story came from having the little crab with the eyes that were up on top of his head and go flying over there. Now I know you didn't have school today, ladies, but if you go ahead, your homework for tonight is to take one little part of one story and share it with somebody else. And that's how the stories will stay alive. It can be just the one, if you like, with the bog over here. It can be anything. It could be saying, "Oh, let me tell you about this guy. He told us about hitting a cow on a bicycle." It could be anything. You don't have to tell the whole story, just one little bit. And that's how stories stay alive. And then even better than that, you can tell your own stories and make them up about your life. Make them up about having fun, looking through books. So thank you very much for coming over here tonight. It has been fun. It's like having a private audience over here. We get all these lights, so it's good. Thanks, ladies.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Tired, eh? Gonna go home now?
Yeah.
Good for you. It's nice. How far away do you live from here? Do you walk over here or you have to drive?
Drive.
Ah, you're young to have your license.
Okay.
Good night.